This is Paul.
This is Audrey.
Week 3, technical track, stretch and compression. At Wednesday Hop, January 2019. We did more frame things, working on the action part from last week and elaborating a lot on that.
First week we did balance. Second week we did frame. This week we're doing movement and redirection as part of stretch and compression, specifically because we can use stretch and compression to cause changes in figures. So anytime that we change a movement and we redirect, or we change a movement type and change the quality of movement, we're going to say is a new figure. So this is how we're using stretch to transition between figures. So this is going to be considered one figure. As you might guess, this is going to be considered two figures that has a change in the type of movement. And this swing out is also going to be considered two figures. And this one is how many? Three. So the bookends to any figure are stretch and compression, and specifically we said that those bookends can change where we go and how we get there.
Yep. And all of this is we're able to do it because we're engaging our frame. And today we talked about how, in order to modulate like your tension and stuff like that, we talked about rubber band metaphor, but we'll get to that in a second. So first, we talked about timing mattering for how you lead and follow the type of movement when you're trying to change that.
Specifically, we said that we had a couple of different exercises, moving each other around. We're not going to demonstrate them here, but the outcome is you need to lead a little bit earlier, specifically because to create stretch requires time. It requires both parties to have a buy-in. You have to request the stretch, as we talked about last time. You have to accept the stretch, as we also talked about last time, and that process takes some time. So whereas a quick movement might be pretty much instantaneous, doing something that actually requires, that is a stretch, requires more time. So anytime we do a movement with stretch, we start leading a little bit earlier. And anytime that we do movement, we don't really need to move that much earlier. Okay, so that was timing. Start a little earlier so that you both have time to build up your frame in order to create stretch.
Yeah. And then we talked about redirecting. So our exercise that we did was...
Oh, we also did the point of maximum force.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes. We talked about that. So that was the part where we're talking about imagine that you have a rubber band between your elbow and your hips, and we're changing the tension of that. So you can think about like you have thicker rubber bands that are really strong, and that means that you're letting that out more slowly. And really what's happening is you're engaging your lats, right? Because what we don't want to happen is you engage your biceps when you have more force, when you have more tension. Now, the times when you might have more tension is, for example, when the tempo is higher, when you're covering more distance. And the reason that you will end up with more tension is so that you don't completely lose your connection with your partner because you went too far, or like you're throwing out your back, throwing out your shoulders, and generally losing control. So, as example, if we're covering more distance on the floor, but you can also see that also takes time, or also when it's faster tempos as well. We want to remain in control and still be very relaxed while still covering the distance that we want to cover. We will need more tension, more force.
Last thing we said about type of movement is the timing of the maximum force is at the point of redirection. So at the end of the rock step, there's the highest force. If you try and have too high of a force before that point or after that point, it's not going to be as smooth, and you might be off balance.
Yep.
Then we moved on to the redirection.
There we go.
Which is from what we just talked about was how we're getting there, and now we're talking about where we're going.
Yeah. So where we're going is originally we started off with a 6-count pass by, which is from one end to the other end, and then we said let's turn that into from one figure to two figures by adding a compression and redirecting the trajectory to not the other side, like so, but at an angle. And then eventually you can turn it into a sugar push because you basically redirect it right back.
And we want to emphasize that we consider each of those two figures and that you have the flexibility to change that interface, the GUI part, which is changing the type of movement. We also said that as a lead, you can lead two different ways. One of them is you have it like a arrow pointing at your chest and you turn it in the direction that you're looking to go. So I'm facing my follow right now. And as I turn my frame, we all naturally move that way. A second one is more like, if we do the exact same thing, rock skipping across a lake surface, and it's like blue like a lake, I suppose. So I'm still oriented the same way, but the follow still changes sides. And we have our frame that follows us and bends and rotates, but we still have the same force of engagement as we did when it was straight in front of us.
So we're no longer just keeping our frame as the forklift in front like this that we've always talked about from, say, beginner swing. Here, now we're really focusing on two things. One is taking care of the tension in partners and our own arms, and also taking care of the lat engagement. So for me, for example, I talked about how as a follow, I'm not ending up like this because I see my lead doing that and I'm like, oh sure, that looks cool. So part of it is visual, but part of it is also the fact that the tension in the two arms is going to be different if it's like this versus like this. And I feel that on my end, and therefore I'm going to respond accordingly.
The main thing we said to watch out for when doing these is you want to have as good of a signal to your partner as possible. So please keep your frame centered in here, not moving all around, no horse whipping with the hands. We talked a lot about that, and that'll make it easier for you to feel what the other person is doing. So good job with a lot of hard material, and we'll be back to wrap it up next week.